Right, totally forgot. I don't really like RGB. When I initially opened the box of the Angry Miao Neon 80, I must admit I was a bit disappointed. The looks seen on Instagram and other promotional photos appeared more exciting than the real-life counterpart I lifted out of the box. I don't want to use the word underwhelming, but picking it up without all of its lights blasting into my face, it did seem just that. What we got here is probably Angry Miao's most understated design to date. This is a company that, besides one board, has consistently come up with quite the extravagant shapes. Not only that, they seem to be in no short supply of equally over-the-top paint jobs that sadly not always make it into reality. But I also must admit, it's been a while since I kept up to date with what Angry Miao is doing. I do remember though that they often use the help of their community to make their design decisions. I always thought that this was quite nice and is something I feel took a part in the making of this board as well. The reason being that it does seem to check a lot of the boxes that people like. For example, it's Angry Miao's first keyboard that fully supports QMK and Vial, an open source tool to configure and customize keyboard controls and layouts. It's also one of their most ergonomically appealing entry with the front chin height of just 18.5mm. Not the first though. And in the world of custom keyboards, it's also not that out of the ordinary, but compared to their previous boards like the Compact Touch or the AFA, it's a lot better and won't have you immediately reach for a wrist rest. Evidently, this is a result of a complete lack of any wireless functionality, which is a first for Angry Miao due to the power requirements of the 389 LEDs on the back. According to my press sheet, the power draw was simply too high, and even after testing it with two 5000 mAh batteries, they couldn't get a usable lifespan out of it, so they decided to go all wired. I don't mind the lack of wireless connectivity, to be honest. Most often custom keyboards rarely come with that feature anyway, and if they do, they never come without caveats. So I very much appreciate the lower chin and the more subtle 7-degree typing angle, which made me feel right at home. The only layout specific part that took me a while to get used to was the distance from the main set of keys to the functions row. It's a little closer to what I'm used to and what you see on most 80% or TKL boards. That means boards without the number clusters, by the way. For comparison, the RamaWorks U80 here has a much more traditional spacing. Closer gaps aren't uncommon though. The very popular Mode Sonnet is a great example of that. The other part that took me a while to get used to and where I'm still struggling is the fully translucent keycap set with their absolutely smooth surface. Normally keycaps have a bit of a texture to them, which can differ from brand to brand. For example, these Monokai Series 1 caps are slightly rougher than these PP Defense caps, and both compared to the Glaciers from the Neon 80 kind of feel like sandpaper. But I much prefer the rougher feel, not because I'm trying to get rid of my fingerprints, who told you that? No, it's because it makes typing feel a bit more airy when I lift up my fingers. The second issue I have is with readability. That's regardless of any RGB at play here, because the letters aren't illuminated anyway. Instead, it's because the characters are in a faint gray, same as the board itself, and from my sitting viewpoint, some rows start to kind of blend in with the surface of the board, making them hard to, almost impossible to read. Now, during normal typing, I rarely if ever look down, but specifically for functions or typing in my passwords when I'm not resting on my home row, I will look down and start hunting. This is especially prominent on the numbers and functions row, which ironically are the least readable keys. I'm sure I would get used to this eventually, but I feel these caps are just a bit more flash than substance, and if you don't want or need the full RGB experience, I'd opt to get this board without the caps, which you can, and get a separate set, which is what I ended up doing as well. In their defense though, the lettering is absolutely perfect. This is the mark that needs to be hit for any keycaps, especially when using die sub-lettering, meaning the characters are printed on rather than using a double shot construction. Everything is crisp and nothing is misaligned or fuzzy in any way. Angry Miao did show off a special keycap set for the white version of this board, but I'm not sure if that will make it into production. They have a very brownish design vibe to them. That is the company brown, not the color. In general, that was one of the first thoughts I had when I looked at this board. It reminded me a lot of those older electronics, in a good way. Otherwise, there's not that much going on other than the obvious light show at the top, which I promise we'll get to soon enough. Alright, enough design talk, let's open this up to see what's going on under the hood. The entry to this board is easy enough, with just 8 Torx screws holding the outer and inner case shells together. These two are actually the only case elements on the entire board. I don't know why I expected more from something that looks this minimal, but I still thought maybe there was. It might also explain the rather light nature of the Neon 80. Compared to other keyboards of this size, like the previously shown RomaWorks U80, the Neon is almost an entire kilogram lighter at just 2.5 kilograms. That doesn't mean this thing is hollowed out, as we immediately discover upon opening it. Focusing on the top first, we have the daughter board, which is attached to the main attraction, that is the LEDs, housed in what I can only describe as the biggest block of diffusion I have ever seen. The job of this block is the widespread and soft distribution of all those LEDs, of which there are only 2 plates, one screwed to the backside and one unfortunately glued into the block itself. Meaning there are no side LEDs. In fact, despite the very convincing show, it's not actually real. One might say this is nothing more than a side effect.
Cheese turbulence, terrible jokes since 2021.
Anyway, if the giant block wasn't enough, there is an additional, unfortunately also glued in layer of plastic, wrapped all around the back of the grille, probably to create an even smoother appearance towards the outside. Don't try to remove it though, I pulled on it a little bit and it immediately started to rip, so better not touch it. Moving away from the top bar, we got the bottom half, which is much more traditional. Here we get a good look at the by now pretty common mounting system on Angry Miao boards, their 3-stage leaf springs. I first experienced this on the Compact Touch, which also incorporated it, and back then I really liked it, which is still the case today. It's quite flexible, both figuratively and literally. In its default state, it's very bouncy, almost too bouncy for my taste these days. Switching it is pretty easy though. All you need to do is unscrew the leaf and change the position of the little stopper. You also get an additional set of even softer leaves in case you like the feel of tapping on a pillow, also known as pillow talk. Personally speaking, I really like leaf spring boards. There aren't that many around these days, but some of my favorites like the Olap Spring have used this mechanism. I also think they sound great. The drawback is that they're usually found in more expensive boards, and in the case of Angry Miao, the requirement of a tool in order to adjust them. Luckily, you will get everything in a box though, so you don't have to go out hunting for tiny Torx bits just to change your bounce. The rest of the innards are standard fare for Angry Miao. We got foam for the case, the back of the PCB, the top of the PCB and another before the plate, as well as a layer of plastic? I can't remember if I've encountered something like this before, but this is probably the most jam-packed PCB sandwich I've seen in a while. It's also hands down the most secured one. The PCB and plate combo combined have more screws than the entire rest of the board. Other than that, I have to commend them for the attention to detail here. I don't think I've ever seen stabilizer tapes on a pre-build before. Just in case you never heard of this, in the world of custom keyboards, one of the most crucial tasks is trying to get these stabilizers to sound as good as they can, as they are most often the culprit of the dreaded rattling. One of the more common modifications to mitigate this is applying a piece of tape onto the stabilizer housing, which appears to be present here. I don't think I've seen this before, even on the Compact Touch from early 2023, but unfortunately I think it still needs a bit of tuning. When I initially started using the board, it actually sounded absolutely perfect, but after about a week of breaking it in, a little rattling started to make itself known. Now, this isn't entirely uncommon. I built plenty of boards which needed a bit of a tune-up after a period of being broken in, so keep this in mind. But regardless of that, it's clear that they paid a lot of attention to how things are arranged and set up in here. This isn't just thrown together, somebody was trying to get this right. But enough ramblings, let's give this a listen before we finally go to the part that most are probably curious about, the giant block of diffusion combined with all those LEDs. Regular viewers will know that I'm not too keen on RGB and should probably place their buttocks on a solid surface before I say this, but I didn't turn the RGB off on this one. It's still running, even while I'm typing the script. I have, however, turned off the light on the keys. In fact, with the keycaps replaced, those don't make that much of an impression anymore. Anyway, but we're talking about the big glowy bit at the top here, so let's focus on that. There are a total of 389 individual LEDs in this keyboard. At the top and addressable are only 230 though. The exact resolution that will test your creativity is 5x46. You'll see this in Angry Miao's software, which is called AM via Light, that has the board shown with all those glowing bits for you to play around with. You can select each individual pixel or even draw directly onto the board, which is fun but more importantly efficient if you want to cover a larger area quickly. You also have a color picker to the right with the usual options and a frame counter that goes up to 255 at the bottom. This is where you'll be able to let your creativity go bananas and come up with the next feature animation ready for the upcoming Oscar season. However, if you are like me, meaning you're equipped with the talent and creativity of an infant, there is another option, a GIF button. This is exactly what I was hoping for. You can just upload any GIF or GIF and it will be converted to be played back on the board. What a relief. I know there are people out there that are able to create amazing animations, but I'm not one of them. However, it's not clear sailing from here on out. Even though you don't have to do much, it's still a bit tricky. You see, the way the LEDs work, it proposes two challenges. First, the resolution itself. As mentioned, we only have 5 horizontal and 46 vertical rows to play around with. This is very, and I mean very little, so if you're hoping to create anything resembling a discernible shape, this is going to make it very difficult. Secondly, the individual LEDs are heavily diffused by that giant block we saw earlier, so you essentially have the biggest pixel bleed over ever. To give you an example of this, let's activate just a few pixels here to see what happens. Yeah, that's a lot of light bleeding, courtesy of the big diffusion block. Let's take another example. When I learned that I could simply upload GIFs, I went on a bender and uploaded everything I could find to the Neon80 to see what would happen. One of my discoveries was this wonderful animation from one of my all-time favorite game franchises. If you try out something like this, you'll notice two things. First is that the image is getting cropped in, which is kind of obvious considering the aspect ratio we're dealing with here. From what I can tell, it will always crop into the center, which is no good in this situation. I want to see the blue hedgehog and his buddies, not their foreheads. So I opened up the animation in my image editing software of choice, cropped in manual and re-uploaded the scene, which then highlighted the second issue, which is what I initially wanted to point out. And that's that you can't make out anything. Which is also obvious. This is a 5x46 resolution after all, and it's, well, to sound like a broken record at this point, heavily diffused. I'm not trying to mock the Neon80 here. I don't think it was designed to display anything this precise. If you want that, take a look at Angry Miao's RGB 65, which has a very similar feature set in a more retro design, or their cyberboards that also do something very similar. However, I could imagine many, including myself, upon seeing this board for the first time, could interpret all these little holes as the actual addressable pixels, but that's not the case. More subtle shapes though are a lot more effective, like this changing gradient, which I end up settling on for the time being. However, that doesn't mean the effect is always lost. Take the good old digital rain from the Matrix here. It's not perfect, but it does somewhat get the idea across. If you want, you can also upload static images, where you even get a window to select the area you'd like to crop, which would have been great to have for GIFs as well. Of course, you can also preview everything before sending it to the keyboard, but be wary of this, it doesn't always reflect the reality that well. Take this waveform for example. Looks pretty dull on the preview, right? Well, on the keyboard itself there's a lot more going on. Partially responsible for that is definitely the diffusion again. So far we also haven't really talked about all the other LEDs, but unless you are making your own animations, it's actually not that exciting. When uploading a GIF or an image, the key LEDs will simply mirror what is on the top. I initially thought it would expand that, but that's not the case. I do think that it works pretty convincingly though. But you can address them independently if you create your own animations. That requires skill though, which I do not have, but luckily there is a small but potent animation gallery in the app itself, with some examples. Applying these is pretty easy too. All you have to do is download the JSON file and upload it again on the animation page. This is incidentally also the only way for you to back up any of your creations via the download button on the same animation page. Otherwise, your work might get lost, and I really mean that, because the software doesn't always remember what I had stored on the board and would often default back to the 3 stock animations. So be careful if you spend a long time creating something and then forget to save it, or when the app crashes, which happened a lot more than I would have liked. In its defense, AMVia Lite is in an early version. However, Angry told me that the full version has already been released in their domestic market, with the same happening in the West once the board hits the shelves. Apart from the Light Show Manager though, I wouldn't really recommend using the app anyway. Considering that Angry Miao has embraced Vile, I'd point towards it in order to customize the rest of the board. The reason being the aforementioned stability issues, but also the fact that the app is rather limited when it comes to the available keys, as well as the lack of any macro or shortcut customizations. In fact, I couldn't even set the macOS command key because it was missing. Either that or I'm spectacularly blind, or just dumb, and I know for a fact that I am at least one of those. Vile, on the other hand, is an open source software similar to Via, which is probably most known in the custom keyboard community. Here you get everything you need. It's also where I set up a couple of macros for window management and found my missing command key. Another issue I have with AMVia Lite is that just like with the animations, it sometimes reverts back to the default keys. Take this example here with both apps open at the same time. In AMVia Lite, it has the left Alt key next to the spacebar. In reality though, I have what's visible in Vile. but I wouldn't really stress about this that much. Again, just use ambient light for the RGB and leave the rest to VAIL and you'll be fine. Still, this left me with a slightly bitter aftertaste, and compared to the stellar hardware, it puts quite a damper on the overall impressions of the Neon80, which went through quite a bit of a rollercoaster ride during the 3 weeks I used it. I quickly forgot about my initial impressions, which weren't so good because I generally started to enjoy using it, but then I remembered how much it cost and, well, that smile turned back into a frown. I know Angry Miao boards can be very expensive, heck, they still sell the Hatsu, their Ergo Split, for over $1,500. And this might sound very hypocritical coming from somebody who spent way more on another keyboard, but I just don't know if I could justify $655 for the Neon80. There is the aforementioned version without the keycaps and switches, which costs $515, but that's still pretty high. And these days there are other companies who make pretty good boards as well. Yeah, this exact feature set and this much attention to detail, they probably don't have that, but if your priority isn't RGB, I'd argue that there are more economical options out there that'll get you close enough without breaking the bank. The one area where Angry Miao remains the undisputed champion though is when it comes to RGB. There's no other company leaning this heavy into that feature, but is that enough? What do you think? Would you, because of that or another reason, consider getting the Neon80? I'd be curious to know. Also, to be completely transparent, Angry Miao did send me this board. I wasn't paid for this video, but I do get to keep the board, but all of the opinions and expressions are of my own. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, have a glowing day and see you in the next one. Bye!